Hi guys, I'm Angela Key and I'm back with another one. And can I just say before we begin that this message right here was all over my toes. And like I said in past videos, that everything that I share with you all are past convictions or things that God's been dealing with me about. And so ultimately what I'm doing is just sharing with you guys my journey of healing, of self-rediscovery and redevelopment. But this message is very powerful, and I think it's on time for where we're heading as everyone prepares for the new year. But a lot of the points that I'm going to share with you in this talk are actually not new. I say that because, these are a lot of things that I had to now that I'm wiser and I'm ready to sit down and look at some things, a lot of the things were just me revisiting. And so because I'm now of a new mind, a new and ready mind, I'm able to see, things from a different perspective, and also I'm able to receive it. So what's so amazing with God is that He's always speaking to us. He's always guiding us on our purpose path that He chose for us, the thing that best fits us, the thing that's great for us. He's always, working to guide us because He loves us so much, and because He has His best interest, or our best interest in mind. But the unfortunate thing is that we're also always speaking to ourselves. We're also always trying to put ourselves on our own path. And a lot of the times it's counterproductive and it's fueled by pride. And ultimately it leads us down this endless cycle or road of repeated heartache and disappointment and unnecessary stress. But because God is so good, and He's a total gentleman, He will never force His will on our will. Instead, He will actually sit back, He'll stand back, and He'll be like, if you need me, I'm over here. But He'll never force His will on our will. He will wait for us to say, okay, God, I think I made a mess of that, and I need you to now come help me get out of this. And how many of us have been there where we had to ask God that, can you come help me? Actually, I do need you. But He waits for us to call on Him, and what He would do is He'll place us back at the beginning. And a lot of the times is where His will begins and our will ends. And so it looks like we're just kind of starting off or picking up where we left off. And I don't want to get ahead of myself in my notes. But hopefully when He does that, we actually are able to learn those lessons and graduate to the next level of our lives. So many times I wish, how many times I could have just paused, listened to what God was trying to tell me, saw the writing on the wall, and prevented me from having to retake those tests. But like the old saying goes, I'm not gonna, beat myself up. Like the old saying goes, it's better late than never. So today's topic, or the title of today's discussion, is actually more with less. Learning how to let go. And I know a lot of people, when we hear more, we're thinking materialistic, because we're in a society that, they measure our level or our value with our status, with what we have, with what we possess. And so I know that this topic or this title can be a little iffy, but trust me, if you stick with me, this is going to bless your soul. So I'm going to kind of speak on the scripture in Isaiah 43:18-19 that says, "Do not remember the former things, or ponder on the things in the past. Listen carefully. I'm about to do a new thing. Now it will spring forth. Will you not be aware of it? I will even put a road in the wilderness and rivers in the desert." So y'all, I want y'all to hold that place in your Bibles. Put that, on a notepad, and just keep it close. I'm going somewhere with this. And so I'm just going to talk from my personal, perspective, as I always do. So for me, I had to learn to let go of some things tied to my past, because they didn't have a place in my future. And I had to come to that realization, because many of us wonder why our present keeps resembling our past, not realizing that what we're actually doing is we're creating a reenactment of our past over and over again through the same languages, the same behaviors, the same mindset, which unbeknownst to us are being influenced by the background noise. So what I mean by the background noise? Well, the people we keep around us, the conversations we entertain, the media we ingest, and even the places we go, they're all interconnected to our present. They're a result of our present and what our present currently looks like. And as a result, there is a continued cycle of attracting the same types of people, which creates the same types of environments that birth the same languages, behaviors, and mindset. And this is something that we're not really aware of. We don't know this because we're not really paying attention to the patterns. And because a lot of the times we're moving through life kind of unconsciously, we're kind of, half awake in life. And it's not until life smacks us in the face, and hopefully when that happens, we're smart enough to kind of sit down and take an evaluation of what's happening around us, look at where we are, so that we can make the necessary changes in our lives to end that cycle. And this is me, guys. This is all me right here. So recently, I had a moment of deja vu. Now, if any of you ever experienced that, it's kind of like, haven't I been here before? That's that feeling, right? And so I was in the midst of studying, always, focusing on growth and just evolving. And in the midst of me doing that is when that moment of deja vu kind of hit me. And it was like the background noise, the things that were happening around me were suddenly amplified. And I was like, okay, so what am I to be learning from here? Because I was sitting there, here I am once again in pursuit of growth and, elevation. And I'm finding myself with, where it seems like I was here before. This is familiar. What is this? And so it was like I was picking up where I left off. Here I am, from the past. It seems like I'm trying to claw my way out of a place of stagnation, a lack of fulfillment and struggle. And I'm noticing the background noise. The background noise has been heightened for a reason. And I hear the languages and I hear the conversation. The same individuals congregating together, talking about the same things. Conversation hadn't changed in over a decade, right? And I'm looking and I'm saying, well, how am I here? I'm looking, I'm noticing what's in front of me, what's in my current present, while I'm in the midst of forward progress. And my second thought was, hold up, wait a minute. Because I felt like I've been here before, and now it seems like I'm repeating my past, and it doesn't really look like I've really gotten anywhere. Well, my second thought was, hold up, wait a minute. I'm not going to end up here again. I'm a new mom, single, I'm in single parenthood and all these things. So the only thing I can think about is, wait a minute, I'm not going to repeat the same things. And so we're not really conscious of our environment, right? We're not really paying attention to what's happening. We're so focused on what we're doing in that moment that we're not understanding that our environment hasn't really changed. And a lot of that is because of the type of energies that we keep around us, the type of individuals that are around us and what they're saying, what their language is and what their behavior is. And we're not understanding that those same things, the energy is transferring into what we have going on in our bubble. Those people are, congregating together and they're having the same type of the same type of conversation. They're co-signing each other on what it is that they're doing, they've been through, playing the victim, all these things. And the language is spewing out of them is going out into the atmosphere. And it's something that we're not aware of. These same types of people are they tend to attach themselves to people that they can relate to, because a lot of the times, let's be honest, those same people are doing the same things too. And so they're going to co-sign and they're going to enable them, because a lot of the times these people are playing the victim. There's this victim mentality that they feed off, and they're feeding off each other on that. And many of us are trying to figure out, well, why does it seems like that each time I'm taking steps forward and I'm beginning to make some progress, we find ourselves behind. Why is that? Well, it's simple actually. It's because we keep going backwards to rescue those same types of people that we keep in our environment that we're not really paying attention to. They're just there. And we do this rescuing through our display of loyalty, our consistency, our being physically present. We feel like that's something that we are showing of our loyalty. And all of those things that we're doing, they're not being acknowledged, they're not being appreciated. A lot of the times those same types of people, they kind of come from a place of entitlement. They think they kind of figure out how you move. They know you're going to always be there. That's their mindset. And so we're doing all of these things for them in the exchange for the need of their approval, for their affirmation. And we can't see though that these individuals are actually anchoring themselves to us. They're keeping us where they want us to be for their personal gain. Now, we can't even flatter ourselves to say, oh, well, they see that I'm of value and they know what I'm bringing. No, it's actually, they're keeping where they want you to be because it's something that they're getting out of it. And how many of us have been, we felt guilty from those people. Anytime we're in pursuit of something, they say little smug comments on, kind of in passing. They may say something like, oh, well, you seem like you have a lot going on. You seem like you're so busy right now. I don't want to bother you. And what they're doing is they're kind of shifting the light, the spotlight from you and from what you're doing over to them. It's like a form of manipulation. But we're not focused on that because we're so focused on trying to prove something to them. And whenever we express ourselves in the desire to move forward from the place that we are to the place, the place that we currently are and the place that they are and they've always been, anytime we do that, this is something that they see. We find ourselves when we are doing this, when we're expressing ourselves, and then we get that the rebuttal of, oh, you seem like you're doing a lot. You seem like you have a lot going on. Well, I need you to do this, but I don't really want to bother you. Well, we find ourselves delaying the things that we want and replacing those things with what they actually want. And they consistently are taking and never adding. They're constantly causing us to feel some level of guilt in pursuing something better. And my friend, this is the reason for the reenactment of the past. Why does it seem like I'm in the same place I was in the past? Our environment, the people we keep around us. And it's those same people that have those same languages that influence our mindset, guilting us into self-sabotaging behavior. And now we have delayed, or even worse, we've aborted our own mission towards the greater future for ourselves in order to stay in the familiar. And there's a couple of lessons that I've learned in the midst of all of this in these few years of just my journey. And one of those things is I don't need your approval. You don't have to approve what I do or what I say, nor do I have to feel included. You don't have to include me. When you get to this type of mindset that you feel like, look, it is what it is. I don't have to be included. I don't have to feel approved or affirmed by you. This is when you start moving differently. Another thing that I learned is that everybody don't need to know all of your plans. They don't need to know what you're doing, because those type of people already think that they got you figured out and they think they know how you move. So you got to switch it up, and you have to kind of keep your mouth closed, and not share everything that you're doing, because when you start going and sharing your future with everybody and it gets to the wrong person, those people or that person can poison the vision, and now they can knock you off the path that God has already shown you in order to keep you idle and to keep you where they want you to be. The thing about the familiar is that you're going to get exactly what you got last time. And you would think that that'll be enough for people to kind of pause and say, well, I need to switch it up then. Maybe I need to change my mindset. Maybe I need to change my behavior. But in reality, the familiar is for them, they feel like the familiar is actually easier. There's no work. You can predict the outcome. It sounds similar to insanity, right? Where with the familiar, you're kind of going back thinking that there's going to be something different there. Well, it's much like the definition of insanity, where you are doing the same thing but expecting different results. But why do we do this though? Why do we keep doing this? Well, in most cases, we're doing this because it creates a posture of victimization. Well, I didn't know that this was going to happen. I don't know why this doesn't seem to be working. And in the words of R.C. Blakes, I follow him a lot. I recommend you guys find him on YouTube, follow him. This guy's amazing. He's really changed my whole mindset of a lot of things. But he says in a lot of his videos that the first time it happens, you're a victim. But now if you go back, now you become a volunteer. So we going back to the familiar and thinking that there's going to be something different there. We already knew what happened in the first time, the second time. So we should know better now. So the more we keep going back, the more we now volunteer to the results of our present. I know that nobody wants to really hear that. But we can try to create this narrative of victim and not understanding why something's not working. But in reality, we keep going back to that thing that we know is not working, lying to everybody else, but ultimately we can never lie to ourselves. We're putting things off, we're procrastinating, but we got to ask ourselves, well, why are we doing this? So this is something that I refuse to kind of repeat, right? The familiar, and this whole moment of deja vu, and me seeing, it's like taking a step out of myself and looking at what's happening around me and saying, okay, I already know what happened before, and I'm not going to do that again. So I'm being intentional about everything that I'm doing. My language, my mindset, who I allow around me, the conversations that I, insert myself into. I'm being very intentional about what I'm doing, because I know that everything that I do is going to alter my future. So one example I'm going to share with you of the background noise and certain individuals attempting to anchor themselves to me was being invited to participate in this annual event that we used to do in the past. This was something that we did as a unit, but because I no longer was a part of this unit, because I no longer identified myself with, this whole group, well, I didn't find it necessary, or it didn't make any sense for me to participate. Now, had I ignored that and decided to accept the invitation to something that seemed to most so innocent, like, what's the big deal? You're going to get a drink. Yeah, we don't hang out anymore, but I'll talk to you on the phone. I'll give you my ear. Yeah, we don't really, do anything together anymore, but I'll grab a bite with you. Everything that we're doing is shifting our progress moving forward. So participating in something that I no longer acknowledge as a part of my identity, it's no longer a part of my life, I would have been digging my heels into the ground of a place of familiarity. And now I'm beginning to relive, I'm beginning to reenact the past, the very thing that I'm walking away from, the very thing that I don't want anymore. Well, now I'm being a volunteer because I'm going back. And the amazing thing about this whole moment was that these individuals, knowing, they should have known it anyway, or understood that there was a disconnect because they were witness to the disconnect. But it's crazy because they were still willing to create this false narrative or this false reality because I guess it catered to their level of comfort. And I don't know if it was something that they're aware of, that they're conscious of, because a lot of the things that we do, it tends to come from a place of, it's been ingrained in us. We're not even aware that we're doing these things, but it fit their level of comfort. And so they were willing to just kind of sweep everything under the rug and pretend like nothing happened, pretend like there was no disconnect. And let's just reenact this, I guess, pattern that we used to do because it creates some type of normalcy for them. But for me, being conscious, I'm like, no, this is something that I'm not a part of anymore. And so I'm not going to do that. And that's something that's very foreign to them because, again, they're used to doing that. They're used to just reliving this thing and continuing to create this, false reality, this land of make-believe, so that it fits, again, their narrative of brokenness. But I'm going to tell you this, that if you continue to do this, if you continue to say, oh, it's no big deal, I'll go out with them tonight, knowing that you've decided to move forward and make changes in your life and say, okay, I'm going to rock with these people in the past. I'm going to hang out with them. I'm going to participate. I'm going to be included in whatever it is that they're doing. Well, what's going to happen is you're going to find yourself right back where you were, in a place that broke you, in a place that hurt you, that keeps you stagnant. You're going to, feel like a hamster on a wheel. You're moving, but you're not going anywhere. And it's because of what's happening around us. But it's not until we stop for a minute and evaluate the environment that we're in, the people that we have around us. It's not until we learn how to say no. We learn how to say, I no longer am a part of that. That's not a part of my identity anymore. And that's something personally that I've been learning to enforce in my life, is the power of no. No, thank you. I appreciate you, but I'm not doing that, or I don't feel comfortable doing that, because I'm being intentional with everything that I'm doing, because I understand what's going to happen if I decide to step backwards and go back into the familiar. And once you do that, once you continue to, shape and be intentional about what's happening, now you're moving differently. But if we are not willing to do these things, then we're going to continue to live the life that you always lived, and you're going to keep getting the same thing that you've gotten. And so the unwillingness to not let go, you're unwilling to let go of the things in the past, and it makes it that much easier to form an identity around it. The memories that we, that keeps us holding on, and not understanding that those things are occupying space. Literally and figuratively, these things are occupying space in your mind. Those pictures that you still have hanging up on the wall. Or better yet, the pictures you still have in your gallery on Facebook or Instagram. This is stuff that's in the past, but you still have it. You still have those clothes, those gifts and trinkets from past relationships, little things you collected on past trips. You still have that. You're still holding on to that. Everything has energy, including your thoughts. And the scripture says that whatever a man thinks it in his heart, so is he. And so here we are, mentally and emotionally stuck in the memories of the past. And now we're attempting to force our past into our present. We are physically here in the present, but our minds are lost in the past. These things of the past, what happens, they form our thoughts, and those thoughts ultimately alter our reality. And so we are reliving our past selves. We're attempting to relive our past self. We're attempting to create the people that we have in our present. We're trying to change them into characters of our past and relive our past. And I may have probably just lost some of you right there, but I'm gonna break it down to you like this. I'm gonna go back to me. So I remember, again, past relationship, obviously it's the past, so it didn't work out. And I'm evaluating some things that's happened, and I'm not lying to you. I started to look back at what I experienced in this relationship. And then I started to remember the things that they said that happened in their past relationship. And I could literally identify at least 9 things that were mirroring the same thing that was in their relationship. And so I was like, I think I sent them a text. I sent them a text of what we were going through. And then beside that was the things that they said happened in their past. And so it was like they were trying to recreate a past relationship using me, the person that's in the present, as a character in the past. And a lot of times, you know, I'm gonna tell you, people, they tend to fight to validate the things that they say that comes out of their mouth. They will fight tooth and nail the things that come out of their mouth. And if that means they have to recreate and change up some things so that they can be right, it'll happen. And that's like people who are like very manipulative, very toxic, unhealthy. And this is something that I experienced. And so that's what I was trying to say about that whole thing. But we are holding on to items, pictures, and all these things. And for me personally, I didn't think that much of it. Not until now, obviously. And I had to make some moves to change that. But I'm gonna give you an example of items that I was holding on to. In the past video, I was telling you, I used the analogy about moving day and how important it is to make space. Well, God was still working on me with that. And so I had a decision I had to make. So when you're transitioning from being divorced into single parenthood and all these things, where there's an in-between that happens. And if any of you have ever experienced that, then of course you're moving from one life and now you're trying to figure out your own. You're trying to, rebuild, if you will. And so a lot of times that may lead you to being at a friend's or family member's home until you get yourself together. And so that was my situation. And I had things in a storage unit as well. So it came to the point where, I had this unit for a while. I want to say probably going on 2 years. And there was a source that would help maintain, this unit. But after a while, I started to feel like that there was I felt like my dependence on this source was I didn't like what it was doing to me. I felt like I was kind of being a little controlled. I didn't like it. And so it came to a point where I had to make a decision. Because I remember talking to God about it, and I was like, I would just let go of everything before I allow anyone to feel like they have control over me, before I feel like I'm dependent on them. I will let it all go. And you got to be mindful of the things that you say, because God will test you. He'll say, oh, okay, really? So you said that you will let it all go. And so I had to make a decision. That I had to make a decision whether or not I was going to continue to utilize that unit or if I was going to forfeit it and even the things in it, because I was just that fed up. And so I decided to release it. The more, if you will. A lot of people say, well, all of the stuff that you had, you let it go. Well, what did I just say? Everything has energy, right? And so holding on to the more, is it really, worth that? Is more really worth it? Because when I released that, I can't tell you the amount of weight that was lifted off of me, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. I can't tell you what less gave me. Less came with freedom. It was an emotional release. It made space. It made room for the new things that God is doing in my life. And so I started to go with the process instead of fighting it, instead of going against it. I started to embrace it. And that leads me right back to the scripture that I started off with, Isaiah 43:18-19. Do not remember the former things or ponder on the things of the past. Listen carefully. I'm about to do a new thing. I'm about to do a new thing. And a lot of the times we get anxious and we start to panic because we don't know what the new thing is, the new thing that he's doing. We don't know what that looks like. And so it can be very uncomfortable and we can start to panic. I had moments of panic. I had moments of anxiety where I was tired of being in the position that I was in and I was ready to take whatever. That's how I felt. And the scripture continues and says that it will spring forth. Will you not be aware of it? So a lot of the times, this springing forth process, we don't understand we're in the midst of the new thing that God is doing because it looks like struggle. It looks like it's taking forever. Why does it seem like I've been in this so long? And I'm gonna tell you something personally that hit me like a couple of nights ago when God was giving me more to add to this message. We don't know that we're in the midst of something that we're supposed to be learning, and we're trying to figure out why, quote unquote, it seems like it's taking so long. Sometimes it takes longer for some people than others to get a thing, and I guess that's me. And I started to understand that, you know what, I'm in the midst of the new thing that's happening, and all of this time is necessary in order for me to get what God is trying to do in my life. This is necessary for me to go through. This time is necessary. And that's when we start to panic. And like he said in the word, will you not be aware of it? He also continues and says that I will put a road in the wilderness and I will put rivers in the desert. So that means, like we always say, you know, as church folks, he'll make a way out of no way. Well, we're in the wilderness and we don't know how something is going to play out, but he says he will make a road in the wilderness. So we can be in the midst of this new thing that's happening and not be aware of it because we're so attached to the past that we can't see the new thing that he's doing. He said he'll put rivers in a desert. So that means that there's going to be some dry spells. There's going to be some dry seasons. But honey, he will revive that and put rivers in that if you just sit still. And this is my personal word, y'all. I'm just sharing this with you, okay? So I had to understand that it was okay to let go. Was it easy? No. Because this was not my plan at all. None of this was my plan. My plan was to just put my little stuff in the unit, and probably after a few months or so, I'm just gonna take my little stuff out of the unit and move forward with my life. Where some things started to change and shift, and it kept me in a place of stillness. I couldn't understand it. I still don't understand a lot of it, but I'm getting a lot from sitting still. And so I had to understand that it's okay to let go. It wasn't easy. And the reason why it wasn't easy, because the things that was in that unit, those things were attached. They had energy on them. There were memories and a lot of things tied to those items. They could be replaced, of course, but the memories and things that came with it, that was my past. And so I was still clinging to that a little bit, but I was proud of myself because I was brave enough to let those things go, because I want to see what God's going to do. So I'm going to make room. So I had to let go of some items. I had to let go of some people. I had to let go of my languages, behaviors. A lot of things had to shift because I was being intentional, because I wanted a different outcome. And so those things had to go. And even my name had to go. As I said before, being divorced, you have somebody else's name. And so for me, and I know that this is going to touch some of you, but bear with me because it touched me first. But a lot of us are still holding on to a name of the past marriage. We're holding on to it because we've connected ourselves, or we've attached ourselves to that identity, because we haven't really let go, because it gives us some form of status. We're still holding on to the past. Oh, well, I was married before, I was Mrs. whatever, and we're still holding on to it because it gives us this placeholder identity. And for me, I had to understand that, okay, wait a minute. So I've walked away from this. This is a past. This is something that was in my past. I no longer associate myself with that. And so I'm going to walk away from something that wasn't good for me, didn't serve me, didn't grow me, broke me, almost took me out. Why am I going to still continue to carry that name? That was my question for me. And so I did some research, y'all, because I was curious. I did some research on the whole history behind and the meaning behind, taking a man's name when you're married. And what I found in some cultures and some traditions is that the history of women taking a man's last name was to show possession, right? To show possession of the wife to the now husband. And in other cultures, that was a representation of a transition of parental rights from the now wife's parents to the husband. The husband now has parental rights over the wife. And of course we had to take it biblically because I'm a Christian. And so we know that biblically, being married, when that happens, there's the joining of two to become one. And so all of this is attached to a name. I paused on purpose, right? I paused for a reason. So you're still joined to this person, right? With keeping the last name is something that, I was aware of. I knew that this is something that I no longer wanted to identify myself with because it was my past. And because I didn't want this to, represent me anymore. Not to mention that, this is occupying space. This name is occupying space and not making room for my husband, who God has chose for me, right? Because the act of taking on a person's name in any form is honoring them. So to keep with the topic of marriage, you're honoring a man when you take his last name. And so for me, I was like, okay, so why am I going to continue to give honor to someone who's undeserving of that? But you know what? I'm going to get off that. That's a whole nother talk. I had to put that in there. God was, get on my toes about that. And so I had to make the necessary, actions to release that. So during this very deep and intimate conversation with someone who's been following my journey, I guess that with them watching me, it was kind of inspiring them to kind of share, and they ultimately revealed why they got married. They told me, the reason why they got married. And they said that the reason why they got married was for the new name, because it gave them some type of identity. They said that they felt like they never got that during their childhood. And so when you hear that, you're saying that, oh gosh, that's a lot of weight, putting on a marriage to give you identity, right? So what was the marriage really built on was my question to myself. And actually, it was something I had to look at too, because I wanted to understand, what was it that I was looking to, what void was I looking to fill, and stepping into something where there were red flags. Let's be real. There were something giving me pause. What was causing me to continue to pursue that? And ultimately, as it was geared towards, I mentioned in the past video that I always felt like growing up, I was never, I'm trying to think of the word. I just always felt like an outsider amongst my siblings, amongst my family. It was something that I always felt. And so walking into a marriage was being included. It was feeling like I was a part of something. It's something that I had to really look at. And that's heavy, right? But now, with the wisdom that I've gained, and now I know who I am, I've embraced feeling like the outsider, because God gives us all individual assignments. And that doesn't mean like that it's going to mirror what everybody else is doing. It may mean that you are going to be put off to the side because you're required to do something else. And so I embrace that feeling of, standing out, And so just hearing this whole testimony about why they got married, and then they seemed like they felt trapped, like they seemed like they were trapped and very regretful. And decades, down the road in their life, they still never got the identity that they were looking for, or the marriage that they wanted. And I thought, wow, because we're searching for everything to give us identity when our identity is in Christ. And so I looked at that and I said, well, respectfully, I don't want to turn out like this person, because I was literally getting a glimpse into my future, because I was kind of in limbo in that moment of my life, and to hear what she was saying was like me stepping into her shoes. And I didn't want that. It was a lot of praying, a lot of fasting that ultimately led me to the decision that I made in divorce, but I didn't want to go down that same path. And so the danger of not knowing who you are, can leave you very vulnerable to broken people telling you who you are, giving you a false identity. You end up being tied to toxic people or toxic relationships, tied or designed to keep you stuck, to keep you bound to them. And it creates this false sense of security, this false sense of love and intimacy. And you end up submitting yourselves to someone that requires you to need them. And you feel like, okay, well, they need me, so this is going to prove my love for them. And that's you chasing that toxic affirmation, that toxic approval from them. And you could never show any evidence of not needing them, because if you did, then they will equate your level of loving them, with that, And that is something that is someone that's looking to or working to control you, actually, because they're requiring you to need them. So let me get this straight. So I'm having to diminish my true self in order to elevate you. I'm having to divorce myself to be who you want me to be. Y'all, that's not real love. That is, love is loving someone who is who they actually are. And it's not who you want them to be or your expectation. That's toxic, because that person is chasing some form of identity. And having the capacity, even, I've heard people say, I've been there for them, and I've shown what I can take, so that proves my love for them. Well, having that capacity to take whatever they put you through, being their ride or die or whatever, or being their hitter or whatever you want to call it, and trying to prove yourself or prove your love to them. Like, first of all, if you're in a position to have to prove your love to someone that's taking you through toxic, through changes and, this toxicity that they're putting you through, then you're already under a level of, control and manipulation. So that's not healthy at all. So you should never look to need anyone, any man or woman. Like, it's great to want to do life with someone and have the choice to say, I want to do life with this person. But the minute you find yourself needing them, making them your other half or your better half or completing you, those are signs of brokenness, and you're not being your whole self. And that was something that I wanted. There's been moments in my personal life where individuals have attempted to position me in a space where I relied on them, and they would judge me for carrying myself in a way that was, independent, and not knowing where that came from. And that's nothing wrong with that. You should be able to take care of yourself. You should be able to rely on yourself if you can't rely on anyone else. And what they would do is they would give and take to create this false sense of control over me. And when I realized that, I realized I was relying on them more than I was relying on God. Well, then I had to let go of them. I had to reject anything that they were attempting to give me. And I would rather lose everything or anything that I was looking to hold on to or to keep before I would put myself in a position where they need to care for a need of mine, because I knew that that was coming from a place of manipulation, a place of maliceness. And so that type of behavior is fueled by extreme low self-esteem, by a lack of self-worth, and many people are okay with you as long as you need them. If you've ever experienced that, they seem to be in a great mood when you seem to be down, and they will feed off of your lack for their gain. They did these things to hopefully get a rise out of you, or for you to acknowledge them in some way. And what you are going to have to understand is that you're going to have to resist giving them any of that, because it's forcing this sense of control over you when you do that. You got to be willing to release them and any benefits that comes with them, because when you're looking more to them to provide, you have this codependency on them, and you're looking to them over Christ. Then what's happening is you're beginning to idolize them, and that's something that you don't want to do. So I remember, I know I keep going back to I remember, but again, this is personal, y'all. But I remember a moment where I was seeking some advice from relationship advice from someone at the time, a friend at the time. I was young, and I probably went back and forth in this relationship a couple of times. But I remember her advice saying something to the extent of, well, if you feel like you can live without them, then he's not the one. And now, looking back at all of that, I'm like, what kind of crazy definition of love and companionship is that? Like, to me, that sounded more like obsession and codependency. And again, of course, it will be hard to move on, without, someone that you love. But if you're believing that life is not worth living without them, like that's something that's a concerning frame of mind. And I believe that anyone that feels that way should get some form of professional help to unpack that, because it's not healthy. But we do that. We look to other people to tell us who we are a lot of the times, and a lot of times we're not aware of it. We live in a society that shops for identity on places like social media platforms. I was reading a study in my psychology class about this study was talking about how people are seeking identity based off the feedback that they were getting. Like, it was like a dressing room, if you will. Like, we will respond by putting on and taking off identity according to comments and likes that we would get. People literally telling you who you are. So that means you actually don't have an actual identity. You are being, told who you are. Isn't that crazy? So when we don't know who we are, people will tell us, they'll tell you exactly who you are. And so I had to do some evaluation and looking at, things, past relationships and things like that, because of course this is in the process of seeking who you actually are. And I was doing a comparison in these two relationships, because honestly it was only two. And I found that there was a pattern. There was a pattern in between the two. And what I discovered was that I was tied to individuals that resented me for things like my drive for, growth, my ambition. I was being resented for that. Even though I was their biggest cheerleader, even though I would constantly pour into them or their potential, to be honest, and tell them, you can achieve your goals, you can do this, that, and the third. And I was doing this because this is something that I saw for myself. This is something that I needed. And so we tend to give people what we actually need ourselves, but it's very dangerous to do that, because in reality we should be the first people or first person to meet our own needs in that type of elevation. We should never look to someone else or say, I'm going to tell this person this because I need them to tell that back to me. Like, you need to be able to be okay with not being celebrated. And so because this is something that we needed. And again, that's because that's a form of a lack of identity. And I know I keep hinting on identity, but if you haven't caught it yet, the things that are tied to us, our past and the people and all these things, are literally creating and shaping an identity, and a lot of the times it's a false identity. So we are going to have to do that work to dig through all of that in order to understand who we truly are. The ironic thing is that the answers are never outside. It's never the outside feedback. It's always internal. It's always what's inside that gives us that answers that we're looking for. And so, we tend to do that. We're looking for people to give us those types of things. And again, this is why it's so important to do your work in your singleness. And I came across an amazing book by Dr. Myles Monroe, and it's called Married, Single, and Life After Divorce. And it really talks about understanding who you are in your singleness. And I'll drop that information in the description below. But back to my point. So we end up projecting outwardly how we perceive ourselves inwardly. And that is what was happening with these individuals, with these relationships, is that they were projecting how they saw themselves outwardly towards me, what they saw inwardly. So when they would come at me with resentment and they could never celebrate me, it was because I was a mirror that they looked into, and what they saw they couldn't identify with. They couldn't see themselves in what I was telling them they were. And I didn't understand this, y'all. This is another tidbit. I didn't understand that you think that is okay. You think that if you're in this relationship and you're saying, oh, you're great and you're this, that, and the third, and the person can't see that. Well, I didn't know this at first, but I guess that's kind of a form of trying to build someone. So if you're doing that, then that's what you're doing. Okay? If they don't see themselves and they're not receiving what you're saying, and they're actually resenting you for even telling them that, then you are actually trying to build someone. So going through all of these things and seeing the comparison of the two, and understanding that, that they couldn't see themselves in the things that I was saying that they were, or speaking into them. And sadly, the lies that they believed about themselves were not actually who they were truly either. And they were actually operating off of a personal level of brokenness, which was, from seeds being planted in them by other broken people. And ultimately, they end up believing what was said to them, those seeds that were planted. They were believing that. And anything that didn't reflect that false sense of identity about themselves, they would end up sabotaging that. So they could recreate the environment that fit their narrative, because it was their personal comfort. And so this is the thing that you have to understand, is that you can never get anyone to see you if they don't first see themselves. Just the same with love. You can't get anyone to love you and respect you if they don't love and respect themselves. You're never going to get that. And I know that's heavy, but the thing that we're doing when we do this is that we're actually chasing the shadows of the people who walked out of our lives, who never gave us the things that we felt like we needed, who never filled those voids that we felt like needed to be filled. And so what would happen is we end up thrusting ourselves on those people that never deserved or qualify for our attention or our energy that we gave them, hoping that in doing that, hoping that they will somehow find it in themselves to fill those voids that we needed. But the sad thing was that they came into this situationship, if you will. They came into it empty, and so they never had a capacity to receive what you were giving them, nor could they ever, give anything back to you. I mean, how many of us have found ourselves being the initiator? Me personally, pursuing them. How many times have, they left either physically or mentally, and we went after them? They never came to us. And I know that if you really think about it, it's hard to think that way, because then we have to also take accountability for looking at all the many times we position ourselves to be let down by those people that never changed, by the way. They were always who they were. We were trying to create something. We were trying to recreate something that goes back to my point in the beginning. We put a lot on people. We look for them to do so much for us when we have to do our own work. Every person has their own limitations. They have their own cap of capacity. They have their own limits to what they can offer us, to what they can give, and what they can receive. And some of the times the things that they are giving or offering us are false, because a lot of the times they operate in a false identity themselves, so they don't even know what they can give. So they just create something, right? But God, He is everlasting. He has no cap. There's no limitation to what He can give, to what He can offer us. He can give us so much, the healing, the peace that He can give us, wholeness, favor. He keeps us from the attacks of the enemy. There's no limit. There's no cap. There's no expiration. We are the place that we need to be seeking. All of these things should come from Christ, because it's real, it's authentic, and it's what we need. It complements who we are. But we can't ask God for more if we're unwilling to let go, if we're unwilling to, handle our season of less, being able to let go of what we feel like we need to hold on to. If we want more, we have to be willing to let go of things that we currently have. We have to be willing to make room for what God is about to bless us with. Release what's in your hands. A closed hand can't receive anything new. You see what I'm saying? Because it's closed. It's not open to anything. And so that brings me to the scripture in Luke 14:33 says, "So likewise, whosoever he be of you that forsakes not all that he has, cannot be my disciple." So if you're not willing to release your will for His will, if you're not willing to let go of the things of the past so that you can walk into the future that He has for you, then there's nothing that He can do. You have to be willing to release everything that you feel like you need to hold on to. And so it's a stripping of the old things, the old identities that's been fed to us, your more that we feel like we need to hold on to. And we have to begin to start to embrace the less. The less gives us so much more from Christ. It makes room for the more that Christ has to give us. And so I hope that this message, I was trying to keep it short, y'all, but it is what it is when God gives you something. Be obedient and give it out. And so I hope that this message, I hope that it helped you in some way. I hope that as we walk into the new year, that we're actually making a necessary space to actually truly be a new you. There's a saying that happens every year. This is New Year's Eve, and people you see it everywhere. New year, new me. But then we walk into a whole new year, and our new year looked like last year. Well, that's based off of everything that I just shared with you. So I hope that you do the necessary work that's required so that you can get your new you, that you can walk into your future light and not heavy, that you're not dragging your past into your future, but you're walking to everything new. And so a happy new year to you guys. Let it be a real, true new you, and God bless, and just embrace the less so that God can give you more. All right, guys, thank you so much. I'll see you on the next one. Happy New Year.